Welcome to another episode of Relentlessly Resilient, where real people share real life experiences and the tools they've developed to move forward and live their best life. I'm Michelle Scharf.
And I am Jenny Taylor. And Michelle, today I'm really excited because our friend that's going to join us today, she's Cindy. Hi, Cindy.
Hi.
I joke and I say she's kind of like where Michelle and Jenny's stories meet, because she is an Army wife and was married to a soldier for lots and lots of years, a man who deployed and served our country very faithfully. And she's also a widow of a man who died from cancer. And so her husband served in the military and then later had cancer and lost that battle. Ultimately, Cindy's got 6 beautiful kids. It's been several years since she lost her husband, John, and she is one of my great mentors. I mean, so many people in my life right now have been such a source of strength, and Cindy is one of those for sure. So, Cindy, I'm grateful to you for joining us today to tell us a little of your story and the journey that is the ups and downs of life. So thanks for joining us, and we're hoping you can introduce us to you and John a little bit. Take us back, give us the love story. How and when did it all start? Tell us all about you guys.
All right. So John and I met in Texas. So he was born and raised in Dallas, Texas, and I had moved there when I was out of high school and kind of in college, and I lived in Garland, and he lived about 45 minutes away from there. And I kept getting asked to go to a singles ward. So for our church where young single adults can meet each other. And I did not have a good attitude about it. And I didn't want to go. And I kept avoiding and rolling my eyes when people would ask me to go.
Rightly
but they wouldn't stop badgering me. Right. And they just wouldn't stop badgering me. So finally I thought, if I just go one time, I can get them off my back and I won't ever have to go again. So I made the trip out to the singles ward there, and I walked in a little bit late. And from here, I'll tell you John's part of the story. So he says he was sitting in the chapel, and he was in the middle section towards the front. And he said it felt like a window had been opened behind him, and he just felt your wife just walked in the room. So he turned around, and there I was making my way up the aisle and trying to find a pew to sit in. He came up to me after the meetings were over, and all I remember was just being in awe and thinking, wow, tall, dark, and handsome. So we dated, and we were married in Dallas as well, and we lived there for a while. And prior to us meeting each other, John had joined the military right out of high school and was in Germany when the wall fell there. And then he volunteered when war broke out to go to Iraq in Desert Storm. And he served in northern Iraq and Turkey, helping the Kurdish refugees there. Following that deployment, he came back to Texas and got out of the military and was attending school. And that's when we met. So after we were married, we continued his education. He became a podiatrist. So we moved from Texas to Chicago, where he finished podiatry school. And we had 3 kids by the time that he finished podiatry school. And we moved and took our residency back in the military. So he entered in as a captain then, and we moved to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where he completed his residency. And right as he was entering in, he was actually at officer basic training in San Antonio. 9/11 happened. So suddenly the world shifted, and the military that we were entering became a completely different place. While we were in North Carolina for his residency, in that 2-year time period, most physicians like to get enough cases to qualify to take their boards. It takes them, 5 years or so. And he got all of them within 2 years because of all the trauma and the medevacs. We would get medevacs from Germany that, they would medevac him from Iraq to Germany and then straight to North Carolina. And he would go out and meet him. So he got a lot of experience, and we loved living there. We were blessed with another child there and then moved after his residency, where we were stationed in Fort Hood, Texas. And we had added another baby. So we had a total of 5 there, and we just loved our life. It was perfect for me, but definitely not perfect and not without trials and obstacles all throughout. But we loved our life, and we're incredibly blessed. John was deployed in 2005 with the 115th Hospital to Iraq and served there. Following that, we got out of the military because they didn't pay for our school, so it's kind of hard to cover medical school. And we moved to Morgan, Utah, where John was practicing podiatry there.
Hey, Cindy, tell us for a second. I know the answer, but I think most of our listeners are going, wait a sec. I thought that's one of the things the military is famous for, is paying for your medical school bills. So tell us the distinction on why his schooling was not covered as a medical doctor and why that meant you had to leave.
So for podiatrists, there is a little bit of distinction. They're kind of the redheaded stepchild. And I can say that because I am a redheaded stepchild. They're the redheaded stepchild.
Oh my gosh, so am I.
So they don't really fit in the orthopedics. They don't fit anywhere. So there's a little loophole. And for podiatrists specifically, they don't cover their medical school.
Okay.
So that was all
so
on us. So
it was just the type of medicine that he was going into was not among those covered through the military.
Correct.
Okay, sorry.
Yes.
Quick clarification, just in case anyone's curious like me.
So we moved to Morgan, and he was practicing. We were starting to pay down some of our enormous medical school debt, and we adopted a beautiful 2.5-year-old boy from China who completed our family. And then on October 28, 2010, John was just 40 years old. He came home from work and had a severe headache. And we both knew something was terribly wrong at that point. So I took him straight to the emergency room, and they discovered a type of tumor there.
So tell us what month and year is this in this journey?
This is October 2010.
Okay, so we're going to take a break right here for a quick minute. We've got kind of this backstory, this love story. I wish we had more time to go into the story of all your kids, because your kids are wonderful, and your sweet baby you adopted, but we'll have to save that story for another day. Let's come back in a minute and talk about that headache, that ER visit, and then, of course, the diagnosis that came with it. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back with my dear friend Cindy, who's let us know this, great American love story. She's married this hero who served in the military, a medical doctor, now out of the military and working in the private world. They've got their 6 kids, including the sweet little one they adopted from China. Feels like the family's complete. Feels like life is on track. You're moving to Morgan, living in Morgan, Utah. And then you said October of 2010, your husband gets these headaches that you both just know this isn't just a headache. So tell us what happens then.
So, and actually at that time, we also had 2 foster children with us because we weren't done having kids. So we had 8 kids.
Oh my goodness. I don't know that I knew that story. And if I did, I didn't remember because I have widow brain.
So he came home from work one day and on October 28th and just had a horrible, worst of your life headache that caused him just vomiting. I immediately knew something wasn't wrong or was wrong. And he kind of, typical male, just tried to muscle through it. And he's like, no, I don't want to go to the doctor. And I felt there was something wrong. I actually dropped to my knees, and it was late at night, and I was like, God, I can't fall asleep and wake up and have my husband dead. Tell me if I need to force him to go to the doctors or not. And I felt this incredible feeling that whatever he decided would be okay. But I knew something was wrong. So I tried to settle him down, and I laid in bed and I thought, I need to get as much sleep as I can because something is really wrong. And he got up a few more times through the night and vomited and just had this headache. So first thing in the morning, I woke him up and we drove to the emergency room. where they found a tumor there in Ogden. And so they took us by ambulance down to Salt Lake. And we didn't come home for 2 weeks. He was in the intensive care there. And so he had a walnut-sized tumor in his brain. And they went ahead and removed it, found out that it was stage 4 glioblastoma multiforme brain cancer.
Oh my gosh. How old are all the kids at this time?
So at this time, I think our oldest was 13, down to 5. We had a kindergartner.
Just so little, all so little.
And our foster kids, which we lost through that because we were in an emergency situation. So he came home from the hospital, and we had looked at the statistics, and for glioblastoma multiforme, it's environmentally caused. There are no other causes for this type of cancer. There's about a 13% survival rate, but they found it remarkable that in John's case, he didn't have any symptoms. This is one of the miracles that we have with his job. He loved his job. He loved serving people and healing. And because he didn't have any symptoms, he didn't have any seizures, he didn't have loss of vision, blurred speech, he didn't lose any of his dexterity or any of his faculties, prior to us finding out. And even through the course of his treatment, he was still able to work, which was such a blessing for him and for who he was. So
I can totally relate to that, Min. It's so important for them to be able to retain their dignity, their life, and their ability to be able to provide for their families. It's such a natural drive and a desire for men, for most men anyway. And that is such a blessing. It's amazing that he was able to not have any of those symptoms.
It is. For me, I question him, like, if this was always the plan, he was going to die, why couldn't he just come home and spend that time with us, before he passed away? But that would have crushed John and who he was. He actually worked until I went to pick him up one day, and he was so lacking so much strength, he couldn't get himself out of his chair because he had given it all to his patients. And I said, okay, you're done. I can't let you do this anymore. And he said, but they need me, and I said, nope, you're worth this. You're worth it. You're done. I'm not letting you come back to work again. But he gave it all. He laid everything out.
Hey, tell us a little, sorry, I'm going to interrupt for a quick second. This is my brain wanders off into these little things you say. And then I'm like, hey, tell me more about that. Tell us about environmentally caused. Again, this is something you and I have talked about before, but I think most of our listeners, that might be a detail that just slipped by or leads some curiosity. So why is that relevant and important and connected to John and his work history?
So because of John's service in the military and where he was stationed in Iraq, he was exposed to the burn pits there. And so he, like many, many soldiers, came home with very rare cancers that they developed, and glioblastoma is one of them. Typically, glioblastoma is only seen in men who are 65 or older. And John was just 40. And there was actually another soldier that we were good friends with who at the same age had it, Joe Biden's son, the same type of cancer.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know a lot of people are familiar with Beau Biden's story. And when we're recording right now, we're barely into February 2020, and Joe Biden is now our president. And that is something that you can talk about and say, hey, he must have gotten this from those burn pits. But from a medical and military perspective, it's not something that's connected to the point that it's covered through health insurance and things, correct? It's not military connected on paper yet, and hopefully Correct. It will be in time. But so in addition to the, that's one of the benefits of a military injury or a military illness or even a military death is that it comes with the financial support. And there's actually a lot of benefits for a military illness and death that, of course, don't make it worth it. I'm not saying that, but so you've had to face the struggle, the illness, the cancer, the diagnosis without the military benefits. Again, like the military benefits you think you'd have for school. Well, you think you'd have them because this was service related, but it's not technically service related. So hopefully that's something you and I, Cindy, see changed in our lifetime, much like Agent Orange from Vietnam. But that's just for those who are maybe a little more war-minded or curious about that. I felt like it was important to mention that even though the Pentagon might not say, your husband was killed in action, he died as a result of his military service to our country. And I'm kind of sensitive to that and want to make sure that's recognized. Not that it's any less horrible when someone dies in another way, but that you've mentioned a lot how service-oriented John was, how he gave everything he had. Well, he really did. He gave our country everything he had, a decade ago, a couple decades ago, that then even to the point that it took his life. So sorry to segue, but I felt like that was something that would be valuable to bring into the conversation.
I'm glad you did. And there are groups, Burn Pits 360 and Jon Stewart are lobbying and getting a database prepared with stories and cases so that, it can be brought before Congress, and hopefully it will be recognized.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it needs to be.
Yeah. So John, we went through treatments for almost 8 months. So from October to July, he didn't have any symptoms. He did radiation and chemotherapy. He refused even the anti-nausea medication because he didn't want it to impact or interfere anyway with the care that he gave his patients through his clinic and surgery. So he just pushed through that. And then July 2011, he started feeling a little dizzy. And within 1 month, he was completely wheelchair bound.
Oh, wow.
So for the next 8 months, he kind of just deteriorated to that point. And then he passed away. From the date we found out, it was 16 months. But some of the hardest things for me but some of the most beautiful were in the midst of the hardest things we faced, those blessings and those silver linings that we discovered. Watching John deteriorate those last several months, it was sanctifying, and it was a privilege to help him. We would all take turns, having one of the kids go up and have dinner with Dad up on the bed, and we would all circle around the bed and read books together, and he would hold onto the wall and get himself down to one of the kids' rooms and just lay on the bed with them and sing primary songs. When his health declined still further, it was such a loving and sanctifying privilege for me to shave him and to bathe him and to spoon feed him. As the tumor continued to take over part of his body, he would get really agitated and want to get up and go. And I'm 5'4", and he was 6'1". And he would try to get up and try to go somewhere, but he was a little confused and really off balance. And I would run and try to catch him. And it was quite a struggle. And one night this was going on, and I was trying to figure out what to do. And I had a memory brought to my mind that when my kids were babies, I would get up in the middle of the night and go into their rooms. And with the baby monitor still on, I would sing them lullabies. It was usually Angel Lullaby from My Turn on Earth, Stay Awake from Mary Poppins, and Baby Mine from Dumbo. And every time when I would return to bed, John would say, "When I'm old and I don't remember who I am, will you sing to me? I love hearing your voice. It calms me down."
Oh.
And I would laugh, and I'd imagine my half-asleep midnight singing, not really bringing comfort to anyone, but I would promise him. And every time he would ask me. So I had this memory pop into my mind. And so I began singing him all of the lullabies that I had sung to our children. And immediately he would just stop and be calm and so still. I don't know how the tumor was affecting his ability to understand at times, but he could feel my love, and that peace would return.
That is so beautiful. I've been in your home. I've met your children. I know you feel that love just being around you. So I love that you've called that a sanctifying time and a privilege. It's exhausting to care for someone who's ill and terminal and struggling with all of those things. And yet you brought out the beautiful side of it as well, the privilege it is to care for someone and to help them prepare for their last breath. And that's just such a beautiful thing. Can you tell us, Cindy, I'm going to keep butting in because I know some of the backstory. Would you tell us a little bit about February? And you've told me this story before, how there was that date that everybody kept asking, what's so important about that date, and how it turned out to be important to your family. Right. I just think it's a sweet, tender story.
It is. And all throughout every single hard thing, there was these buffers and beautiful testament of God's hand in our life. And one of the first things I did when John died is, I looked for evidence that this was part of God's plan, that somehow there wasn't a mistake and he didn't mess up. And I would look back and how was I going to care for these 6 children by myself? And a memory was brought. An incident happened several years before John even got sick. So we live in a small rural town, Morgan, Utah, and it's about 20-30 minute drive downtown. And so we were often in the car, and our oldest son for years would just ask, "Hey, what's February 20th? And it just, started out randomly, and we're like, "We don't know." And he's like, "Well, is somebody's birthday on February 20th? And nope, there's no birthdays. Well, did Dad get deployed on February 20th? Nope." And every time we would get in the car, it happened so much that everyone in our family knew. He would just ask and say, "I just feel like there's something really important about February 20th. Did I get baptized on that date? Was there a world event that happened on that date?" And he would just question us. And there was nothing on February 20th that any of us knew. And this went on for a couple of years, and then it stopped. And the week that my husband passed away, my oldest son, who was then 15, he and I got in the car to head toward town. And we were driving through the canyon, and he just gasped and said, "Mom, I know what February 20th is." And February 20th is the day that my husband died. And to me, this is just that evidence for our family that God knows us, and he has a plan for us, and he's watching over us. Years before my husband was ever even ill, he planted this little story in our family's lives so that we could know of his hand and his love.
I love that you said your prayer to God was, "Let me know that this isn't a mistake." I don't know most of us ask God that when we're in a trial. We say, is it a punishment? Is it just you don't care, you don't love me? I mean, there's a lot of things people default to when these tragedies happen. But you just wanted to know if it wasn't a mistake. It really was part of his plan. And to know that, I mean, that cute story with Austin and his questioning years ahead of time, I mean, clearly God knew that wasn't a mistake. It was part of the plan. And what a confirmation that must be. I just love that story because it shows God is aware outside of our concept of time. We live in the before and after. Everything's linear time. And I think that's not how God works. The universe has time outside of those bounds. And I'm grateful that you would share that with us because I think it's a sweet, tender story that shows there's bigger picture. There's a bigger picture to our lives, and children are often the ones who are best suited to helping us kind of bridge that gap between us and the greater existence beyond us.
That's an amazing story.
Isn't it sweet?
Yeah.
So sweet.
And I feel like those little signs and evidences are there all the time. In fact, it's my mission to look for them because I need all the tools and the help and the reassurances that I can get because I'm not enough for one person, let alone 6 people.
I hear that.
Yeah, right.
There's so many things. Go ahead.
So knowing that God knew this was part of the plan, he provided so many things as tools and aids along the way. And as I look for them and as I seek for them, I always find them. I call them my postcards from heaven.
Oh, that's sweet. We need to take a break. And when we come back, we want to hear more from you about how you've been able to pick up from losing your husband and what it looks like moving forward. But also for Jenny and I think we need to hear what does it look like years down the road? What does that resiliency look like? And we'll be back in just a moment. I can't wait to hear more from you. And we're back, and we're with Cindy, and she's shared her beautiful story of your husband, also named John.
And also a soldier. See, Cindy is where our worlds collide.
Yeah, you're the combination of both of our stories. I can relate. You talked about having 6 kids and not being enough. My husband, before he actually died, had a near-death experience when my children were all very young. And as he was in the emergency room, I remember getting down, and they were basically saying, he's gone. And I got down in his ear and I whispered, "Don't you dare die on me. You are not leaving me here with these 4 kids. You wake up and you come back to me right now." And he did. and there's a much bigger story here, but that's the gist of it. So I know what it feels like to be a mom, have a bunch of young kids, feeling overwhelmed and thinking, "Don't you dare leave me. You cannot leave me right now." So what were the ages of your children when he did pass away?
So I had 6 children, and they were 15, 12, 10, 8, 7, and actually my 7-year-old had just had a birthday right before John passed away. It was 2 weeks before he passed away. So 2 7-year-olds.
Wow.
So 6 kids, 15 to 7.
Oh my goodness. Just a house full.
So Cindy, teach us, because like Michelle said, you're further along in this journey time-wise, and I would say wisdom-wise than for sure me. What is resilience? What did that look like right after John died? Maybe tell us a little the funeral period, those couple of weeks where everything's so new, moving into the next few months where you're trying to kind of get your head back on, the first couple of years, and then now you're several years out. Can you walk us through a journey of resilience, what it looked like in those different stages, and then what you've learned about resilience in your own life?
Right. And I think for me, it started when we found out John's cancer had returned and there was no more treatment that could help him. I had 6 little people that would follow me wherever I put my faith. And I knew I had to find the right place to put it. I didn't want to invest effort and faith in something that wasn't part of God's plan. But I wanted to put it in his plan and lead my children in that same place. And I think part of that, the biggest part of that, is taking ownership of those trials and flipping the mindset from being a victim to choosing. Because I do believe that I chose part of my mortal experiences here, and that perspective, and even those that I don't choose, I feel have value in my life. The things that we have learned and how they've changed me and helped me become a better person, I find value in those trials. And by finding that value, I have perspective. The few things that I did right at the first, just a few little simple things, were just have grace with yourself. We try to tell ourselves how we should behave when we're going through severe trial, or we try to set time limits on it. And
well, I think that's set culturally, which is really the purpose of us doing this podcast. We kind of want to break down those cultural expectations, because, what I discovered in my loss is that everything that we're told culturally is a lie.
There is no one size fits all.
Joy and pain can be felt simultaneously. Grief doesn't stop at year 1. There's a lot of those things, right?
Yeah, all of those things are true. And, knowing that John was going to die, I tried to anticipate. I like to know things in advance. If you tell me it's going to happen, I'm going to react a lot better. So I tried to prepare myself. I knew that it would be so hard to be separated from him physically, and I knew that I would miss him. But some of the things you can't anticipate until you experience grief. And I didn't realize I would have to grieve me because I changed.
Right.
I didn't function the same way that I did. My mind and my memory My words were jumbled. I lost the desire to do some of the things that I used to find joy in. So just me as a person changed. And I think that's the part we understand that you're sad. But I think that's the part you try to beat yourself up with is, well, but you need to get back to you.
Right.
And so just giving myself grace. I had told myself that for 1 year, however I felt was okay.
And Jenny, we haven't really talked about this, but I love that you brought it up, Cindy. Grief is physical. It's so exhausting. And I was a lobbyist and I would have to go into committee meetings, and there were times that I could not formulate my words. I couldn't recall simple words, just simple conversations. And I would find myself trying to have conversations with people, and I would realize I have lost the ability to hold a conversation. And I have a mother who was diagnosed at the same time my husband was sick with dementia and early onset Alzheimer's. And I thought for a while that, like, I've got a real problem here because, what if I'm having these symptoms? Because it's your brain can't take it all in.
Right.
It's so overwhelming. And I don't think people you can't possibly prepare for it. And I don't know that we can possibly articulate it ourselves in a way for people to really grasp, but it is so physical on every level. You are physically exhausted. You are unable to recall simple dates, times, places.
Words, like you said, I'm having a conversation and I can't remember that word. That's like a really normal word.
I was a planner. I was able to juggle multiple tasks and different schedules and different organize things and have projects in different stages. And I was not able to manage any of that. That was all gone. And I realized I'm not the same person anymore. And it really scared me. But the other part of that is the loss when they pass away. Especially, I was married 32 years to this man, and I feel like there's that intimacy and that bond, and I'm not talking sexually, I'm just talking that physical, energetic bonding and intimacy that you have with a partner. And I feel like when he passed away, literally half of all my cells were
That's exactly
stripped
how
away
I
from
felt
me.
as well.
Yeah.
And I explain it because that's the part we try to tell ourselves we need to get over is the changes that happen within us. But giving yourself that grace that it's okay that I'm changed by the trials that I've gone through. And it's okay that I'm now handicapped. Like my husband's gone, and that handicapped me severely.
It's interesting that you phrased it that way.
I was happy. If I was crying, I was crying. If I was exhausted, and as soon as I got the kids out the door, I went back to bed. That was okay. Grief is exhausting. It's hard work. So that's what I did kind of early on. And then as I kept moving through my grief, just finding that taking ownership of it changed my ability to act. And I could act in ways that were better for me. And I actually came to feel that I've been entrusted with trials, that they're sacred things because they change you and because they teach you. And it's a sacred privilege that I've been entrusted with these trials. And it's up to me to find what their purpose and perspective is. And one of my kids taught me this lesson that I love. It's about mountains. If you imagine a really, really tall mountain, and about a third of the way up, what do you notice? What's different? About a third of the way down from the top of the mountain, things change. It's more rocky. There's not really many trees, and there's not as much greenery. And that's on purpose because it's in the valleys that we grow. It's in that hard upward climb that we experience the most growth. We all want to get to the mountaintops to have that perspective. And I feel like we do at times. And when we're up there, I can look back on my life and I can see how the trials and the experiences I've had shaped me and built me. And I can look forward and I can see where the things that I'm going through right now are leading me. and they're good places. But then, I'll have a great day like that where I have that perspective. And then the next thing you know, I'm down in the valley and I can't even see the sky. And so it's important to hang on to those perspectives and to recognize that, trials are the blessings. That they bring that learning and those added things into our life that can't come in any other way. In fact, my husband used to say, let me see if I can find it really quick. Well, actually, I love Marcus Aurelius has a quote that says, love the hand that fate deals you and play it as your own, for what could be more fitting. And that's something that I try to do today. I try to love my life, and I'm happy. And there's days where I'm sad, but I am happy. And John used to say, trials allow us to see the majesty and miracles of God, which could not be manifested in any other manner. And I found that true as I look back upon the hand of God and the miracles that we've been given in the midst of extreme trial. That is definitely true. And after John died, that wasn't the end of my one and done, I thought, but that wasn't the end of our trials. We had quite a few trials.
We say that on this podcast all the time. Wouldn't it be nice if it was one and done? But everybody could be on this podcast and fill it with 10, 15, 20 episodes. Some of us are more blessed than others with more trials. But yeah, don't we all wish it could be just one and done?
That is for sure. But those lessons and those postcards from heaven that I get all the time to help me to know that, John is still part of our family. He's still helping us. This February 20th will be 9 years since he passed away. And it's still hard every day. I think one of the analogies that I like about grieving is waves. That you live on the ocean now, and there's waves that come and they come crashing on you. And sometimes you can barely keep your head above water, and it never goes away. People often ask, does it get better? Does it get easier? It never goes away. You're always in the water. It's always swirling beneath you. There may be long periods of time in between waves, but at any moment, a huge wave can come and knock you over. But one thing that does happen is you don't even notice it, but you become a better swimmer. And I think the first time you notice it is when you meet someone else who is grieving. And all of a sudden you have these tools and this understanding that you can offer to a new person.
And that's the one beautiful thing about being a widow, which I didn't expect. You want to help that next widow. You don't want to know another widow, and yet you want to be able, when I hear that recently somebody in my neighborhood lost their spouse, and, you want to reach out, you want to help, you want to offer resources. It does come naturally because you want to, it's like you're in the lifeboat now and you want to extend your hand and say, it's going to be okay. You're not going to drown, I promise. And
after 9 years, I figured out a one-arm dog paddle. That's how good I am.
Yeah.
I can teach you that.
And yet I'm going to jump in there because Cindy, somehow you're able to one-arm dog bleh. You're able to one-arm dog paddle while hanging on to me and hanging on to other widows and hanging on to your 6 children. And that's maybe what you don't see because you're the one dog paddling, but I see that. So I'm going to back up for a second. Here's when I met Cindy. I met Cindy, I think it was January, shortly after Brent died. So that would have been 2019. It was a horrible, awful, gray, cold, wintry, nasty Utah inversion day. So that's set the stage right there. And we all, when my husband died, everybody in the world wanted to introduce me to every other widow they knew because I think they don't know what to do with you as a widow. So they're like, here, go talk to that other widow. She'll help you, which of course she will. And so several of us knew another fellow widow friend, that Jen Funk. I hope we bring her on soon too. But So we had arranged to meet for lunch. This was before the pandemic when you could for reals go to lunch and nobody knew what a mask was. And I remember sitting at this table. Cindy at the time was 7 years out from having lost her husband. There was another widow just a few months ahead of me, another widow a couple years ahead of me, and then another one closer in timeline to Cindy and even a little further. And I remember just weeping through that whole lunch because they still had such a strong love for their husbands, even after months and years had gone by, because they were still sometimes dog paddling and yet not always dog paddling. And that just gave me, Cindy, I don't know that I could find words to tell you the hope you gave me, because I think before a lot of people had tried to cheer me up and give me hope and be optimistic. And I have a lot of faith, and they'd say, oh, your best days are ahead of you. And oh, it gets better in time. And part of that was like salt on the wound. If getting better in time means I hurt less that my husband's dead, well, then I don't want to get better. I don't want to not miss him. I don't want to get over this and my best days are ahead without him. Like that all just felt like 2 thumbs down. But meeting you and this other group of widows, we have a texting group, by the way, we call Widow Power. So it's really pretty cool. And they are my widow power. And, but meeting you ladies who could say, and we're laughing and you're having a great time and you're crying because your husband's still dead even after all these years, and you're still facing struggles and grief and challenges, and you have a hopeful and a beautiful perspective, and you've learned so much, and you serve and you give in your life. That to me was such a respite for my exhausted, grief-stricken soul, because I could look forward to the future with hope and optimism and all the beautiful things my faith teaches me, without feeling like that meant I was leaving Brent and our love story behind. And that's what you've taught me, that John's still part of your family. Oh, Brent's totally still a part of my family. And there's still days that I hit the waves of grief as if it were 5 minutes ago you told me he's dead. And there's days when I get going and I'm enjoying the view on the waves and it's beautiful on a sunny beach kind of feel. And then 2 seconds later, the tsunami's on top of me and it came out of nowhere. But you ladies gave me a real hope. It wasn't like a canned, hey, your best days are ahead of you. It was, hey, let me show you what the days ahead of you look like, because you will become a better swimmer. And I love that analogy because I don't want it to be that I get better and happier and over this in the future by leaving Brent behind or by forgetting this ever happened, because that to me is just not even an option. And so to say, you're still on the water and be mindful because the waves are going to come. But now I don't fear the waves as much because I anticipate them. And I don't exactly anticipate them, and they still, take my breath away. And a couple nights ago, I was a total wreck all night. Friday night, like 3 days ago, I was a basket case as if this were brand new. But even in the middle of that, I could remind myself, but I know how to swim at least a little bit. And I know that sometimes the water calms down. And I know there's other ladies who are better swimmers than me, and other men and people in my life. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there, how that day I met you, still counting by weeks that my husband was gone, and literally crying through that luncheon, gave me such hope of what widowhood could look like, what grief could look like, what happiness and heartache could simultaneously look like. And I feel like that's what you embody. I know all about John. I love John. John's a part of you. I've never even met the man, but I know you. I know you're still connected to him. I know he's still a part of your life by the way you live your life and by the way you talk about him and you include him. And that doesn't mean you've stuck in time back to that day he died and you're just withering away. That's not at all what it is. But you've taught me and so many others like me how to embrace that. I love you said, own it. This is the hand you're dealt. Run with it. Isn't it a great hand? And you're looking for those blessings. And as you look for them, you find them. And as you find them, you're grateful for them. And it's this beautiful cycle. But I just want to thank you, and anybody who knows you knows this is true, for the way that you embrace this. And you don't pity yourself. And you don't just barely get through this. And why did this have to happen? But wow, look, I'm capable of doing this. And God trusted me with this trial. And I'm strong enough that I can figure this out, even if it is one dog paddle at a time. So just love you, love what you've taught me, love what you continue to teach me. And I don't think I don't think it's by accident. I think every widow has that widow that's just a few, I call them lampposts. They're just a few steps ahead. And you think, if I can make it to where they made it, if their kids are okay, my kids will be okay. I think God has a hand in that. He brings us together
to allow us to help one another through our experiences.
And I think it also helps that widow that's further down the road. I know for me, I am 2 weeks away from being 2.5 years out from losing John. And it's ridiculous that we know those things so well.
But we do. Every single one of us does.
And but I know that for me, when I'm reaching out, whether it's online or in person or through dropping off, a message at a doorstep for somebody, I know that for me, I have been able to see my own growth in when I reach out, and it does something for me too. It makes me realize I'm doing pretty okay. And it gives me permission to give myself that grace that you talked about.
Right.
That I'm doing okay. I'm doing better than I think I am. And I just need to keep taking it one day at a time.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate your story. Thank you for coming on and sharing your John with us. I'm so sorry about your loss, and I hate cancer. It's a brutal way to go.
Cindy, I love you. I'm so grateful that you would share so much of your heart with us and this story, and let our listeners get to know John a little bit better, and you and your great heart. We're grateful for your thoughts on resilience, and grateful for our listeners for tuning in as we try to kind of dissect what is resilience. How can we be relentless in our resilience? How can we share with each other these stories that we have? And we know among our listeners there are people who also have stories to share. So we hope you'll reach out to us, or if you've got a friend or family member that you feel has a story to share, just the everyday way of getting through what life has to throw at you. That's what we want to hear. That's what we want to share. That's how we want to lift each other up. If you do like what we've heard, we'd love for you to give us a like and a rating, review on whatever podcast form you use. You can find us on iTunes, on Spotify, on Omni, wherever you get your podcasts, on KSL, of course. If you want to email us and reach out about a story you'd like to share, you can find us at rrpodcast@ksl.com. And on social media, you'll find us on Facebook and Instagram at Relentlessly Resilient. So thanks again for joining us today. Thanks, Cindy, for being with us. And everyone listening, remember today to be kind. Whatever you do, be kind. You have no idea the struggles other people are facing in their lives. Have a great day, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.